The desert had a way of stripping a man down to nothing but his will. Elias Ward trudged across the scorched stone, each step sending dust spiraling in brittle, suffocating clouds. His canteen was light, nearly empty, and for the past 2 days he had rationed his last drops with a soldier's discipline. Yet thirst clawed at his throat, a beast that no training could fully tame. The horizon shimmered with mirages that promised rivers and shade but dissolved into dry laughter as he drew closer. He had long since stopped cursing the heat. Now he simply endured it. He hadn't come here for comfort. He'd come chasing whispers, half-forgotten stories passed among explorers and drifters, a cavern hidden somewhere in the desert's spine, older than recorded history, home to a pool whose waters were said to glow without light. Most dismissed the tale as superstition, the kind of nonsense that grew in men who wandered too long without company. But Elias had fought wars on 3 continents. He knew the difference between fantasy and the weight of something real. There had been truth in the eyes of the old nomad who had spoken of it, truth wrapped in fear. By the time he stumbled upon the fissure, he was certain he had reached his limit. The ground sloped suddenly, cracked open as though the mountain itself had split in a silent scream. Elias steadied himself on a jagged rock and peered into the narrow mouth of shadow. Cool air breathed up from below, damp and unmistakably different from the arid wasteland around him. His pulse quickened. He dropped his pack and eased into the opening. Inside, the temperature fell sharply, and the sound of his boots against stone echoed like hollow drumbeats. The air smelled mineral-rich, tinged with something metallic. He switched on his flashlight, but it was unnecessary for long. As he descended, faint glimmers appeared on the cavern walls, crystals embedded in the stone, casting a dim, spectral glow that shifted with his every movement. It felt less like stepping underground and more like trespassing into another world. The passage opened into a chamber vast enough to swallow a cathedral. At its center lay the pool. It was smaller than he expected, no larger than a farmhouse pond, yet impossibly clear. Its surface shimmered not with reflected light, but with its own inner luminescence. Gentle ripples spread outward though no stone or draft disturbed it. Elias froze, his breath caught. He had imagined this moment through the long march, but imagination had been pale compared to reality. There were markings around the pool, carved directly into the rock. Lines and spirals, sharp angular patterns, symbols that belonged to no human tongue. They seemed to pulse faintly, answering the water's glow. Elias crouched beside them, running his hand along the grooves. The stone felt warm, as though it remembered heat long buried. He knew he should hesitate. He knew enough about survival, about the tricks of nature and the madness of men, to avoid drinking from an unknown source. But this was no ordinary water, and his throat burned with every dry swallow. The choice was already made the moment he set eyes on it. He dipped his hand into the pool. The water was shockingly cold. It stung his skin like needles, then soothed it like silk. He cupped a handful and drank. It slid down his throat like fire and ice combined, searing, alive. His body convulsed, knees buckling as the liquid coursed through him. He collapsed beside the pool, gasping, his heart hammering so violently he thought it might tear free from his chest. His vision fractured into colors and shapes he could not name. Every nerve in his body screamed awake. When the storm inside him finally ebbed, he rose unsteadily to his feet. The chamber looked different now, sharper, alive in ways he had never noticed. He could see the faint movement of air, the shimmer of dust motes falling like microscopic stars. He could hear water running deep beneath the stone, veins feeding the pool. His body felt lighter, stronger, yet unsteady, as though his muscles had been rewired without his consent. He pressed a hand to the cavern wall, steadying himself, trying to make sense of the transformation. This was more than relief from thirst. Something in that water had claimed him. And then came the voice. "You have no idea what you just became." Elias spun, hand instinctively reaching for the knife at his belt. His flashlight beam slashed through the chamber, cutting across stalagmites and shadowed alcoves. Nothing moved. Yet the words had been clear, a whisper carried directly to his ear, close enough to raise the hairs on his neck. "Show yourself," he barked, his voice bouncing back at him from the stone. Silence. Only the faint drip of water from somewhere unseen. He turned slowly, scanning every angle. His pulse was still ragged, though now it was not only from the drink. He had fought men with rifles, hunted insurgents through jungles and cities, but he had never felt watched like this. The cavern seemed to tighten around him, its glow turning colder, more alien. Again, the voice, softer now, as though sliding along his thoughts rather than entering through his ears. The water binds what lies hidden. You are marked. Elias gritted his teeth, refusing to show fear. Who's there? The reply was only silence. But in that silence, he swore he felt a presence, vast and patient, pressing in from every angle. He was no longer alone in this chamber, no matter how empty it looked. He backed a step from the pool, his instincts screaming at him to leave, yet his body rooted to the stone floor. Something had changed, not just in his senses but in his very skin, as though a second pulse beat beneath his own. He clenched his fists, testing the strange strength in his limbs, knowing without doubt that whatever he had drunk had rewritten him. The desert had almost killed him. The pool had saved him, or perhaps condemned him. He could not yet decide which. Elias swallowed hard, forcing down the last taste of that impossible water. He turned toward the passage that would lead him back to the surface, but paused. The chamber seemed to breathe, and from somewhere deep within its walls, the echo of that whisper lingered, carrying with it a promise and a warning. He did not know what he had become, but he understood this much. The world outside the cave would no longer see him as it once had. Something ancient had awakened, and it had chosen him. And the worst part was the gnawing certainty that the choice had never been his at all. Elias emerged from the cavern's passage hours later, but the desert light felt sharper, almost hostile, as though the sun itself had taken note of him. He blinked hard, yet the world refused to settle into the dull haze it once held. Every dune, every crack in the stone, every gust of wind carried details his eyes could not ignore. He saw patterns in the sand, heard the scurrying of creatures beneath the surface, smelled the trace of moisture in the air miles away. His body hummed with restless energy, yet at its core, a tremor of unease gnawed at him. He had been remade. Elias forced himself to walk, step after deliberate step across the scorching flats, but his pace grew erratic. His muscles did not tire, yet his heart raced and slowed in fits, like an engine stuttering under strange fuel. He clenched his jaw, pushing forward, until at last he stumbled against a boulder and pressed his forehead to its sun-warmed surface. For years discipline had been his armor, the soldier's iron grip over flesh and mind, but here he felt it slipping. His body was no longer his alone. He remembered the whisper. The certainty in its tone chilled him more than the desert night ever could. Something had seen him, marked him. That voice had not belonged to his imagination. He had lived long enough with his mind intact under fire to know when a thought was not his own. By dusk he had found shelter in a shallow cave. He lit no fire, though he longed for warmth. Instead, he sat in darkness, listening to his own pulse as though it carried foreign beats between the familiar ones. He tried to sleep, but every time his eyes closed, visions flared, battles across alien skies, structures that pulsed like living hearts, voices layered over one another in languages he could not understand. He woke each time with clenched fists and a sheen of sweat that froze against his skin. When dawn broke, he returned to the fissure. He could not stay away. The desert offered no answers. The cave, for all its danger, promised them. Inside once more, the glow of the crystals welcomed him with an almost expectant hush. The pool lay still, its surface perfect as glass, as though nothing had stirred it the night before. But the chamber was not empty. A figure stood opposite the pool, tall and spare, robed in cloth that looked woven from shadow. His face was gaunt but stern, his eyes pale and unblinking, reflecting the water's glow as if it lived inside him. Elias froze, every instinct poised for combat, but the man neither advanced nor reached for a weapon. "I knew it would be you," the stranger said, his voice carrying without strain, resonant against the stone. Elias kept his knife ready. "You've been following me?" "No. Waiting." The man stepped closer, movements deliberate, hands visible at his sides. "My name is Kale. I am the watcher of this place. Guardian, if the word suits you better. Guardian." The term struck Elias as both absurd and believable. Everything about Kale carried an air of patience stretched over centuries. You drank, Kale continued, tilting his head as if studying a specimen. And you lived. Elias's grip tightened on the knife. You knew what the water would do to me. I knew what it might do. Most who dare to drink never rise again. The pool accepts few. It seems it has accepted you. The words landed like a sentence passed down in a courtroom Elias had never agreed to enter. He felt anger rise, hot enough to crack through his caution. Accepted me for what? Kale's eyes gleamed. You are now a conduit. The water awakens what sleeps inside certain men. You are one of them. Your body carries echoes of a design older than humanity itself. Elias took a slow step back. I didn't ask for this. No one ever does. Kale's voice softened, though it carried no pity. But choice ends the moment you drink. Elias swallowed hard, struggling to steady his breath. Then tell me what I've become. Kale moved toward the carvings on the wall, tracing the symbols with long fingers. At his touch, the stone flared faintly, alive with hidden fire. Long before your people built cities, another race shaped this world. They experimented with life, with forms of survival beyond the stars. Humanity was adjusted, here and there. Seeds planted, traits hidden. Most of your kind live and die never touching that inheritance. But a few carry within them the right spark. And drinking from that pool lights it, Elias muttered. Kale nodded. The water is no spring. It is a living memory, left behind by those who departed. It seeks men who can bear its burden. You are the first in centuries. The words churned Elias's gut. He wanted to deny them, laugh at the absurdity. Yet his own senses betrayed him, this vision, this strength, the way his heart rattled and surged. Every part of him screamed that Kale's explanation, as insane as it sounded, was true. What happens now? Elias asked, though he feared the answer. Kale studied him with a gaze that seemed to measure not flesh but soul. Now, you must survive the awakening. The water has entered your blood, but it has not settled. If you endure, you will become whole. If you fail, your body will consume itself, and you will end in agony. Elias clenched his teeth. You make it sound like a test. It is. And it has already begun. The chamber shuddered as if in response to his words. From the shadowed corners, a sound rose, metallic scraping against stone, a low, inhuman growl. Elias turned sharply, knife raised, as shapes pulled free of the darkness. They were not men. Their forms glistened with plates of bone and shards of steel fused into sinew. Eyes glowed faintly, fixed on him with predatory hunger. They moved with a mechanical rhythm, as though answering some silent command. Elias's pulse surged. His instincts screamed to fight, though his rational mind reeled at the impossibility of what he faced. Kale remained where he stood, expression unreadable. These are the guardians. They exist to test the chosen. To tear apart those unworthy. And you're just going to watch? Elias growled. Kale's reply was quiet, firm. Whether you live or die is not mine to decide. The pool has chosen. Now prove it was right. The creatures advanced, claws striking sparks against the cavern floor. Elias dropped into a stance, the soldier in him rising from the depths of memory. But as the first lunged, something inside him ignited, his reflexes blazed faster than thought, his muscles answered with terrifying strength. He drove his knife forward, meeting the beast head-on. The fight had begun, and with it, the measure of what he had truly become. The first creature hit him with the weight of a charging bull, its claws slashing for his throat. Elias twisted at the last instant, his body responding with a speed he did not command. The knife in his grip found its mark between plates of bone and metal, sliding deep into flesh that hissed like steam. The thing shrieked, a sound more mechanical than animal, before collapsing in a heap. Elias ripped his blade free, his chest heaving. Another lunged from the left. His arm shot out before he thought, catching its throat in a crushing grip. Bones snapped under his fingers as if brittle twigs, and he hurled the creature into the cavern wall with enough force to break stone. Shock rippled through him. He had never possessed such strength, not even in his prime as a soldier. Whatever the pool had given him was no longer hiding, it was fighting beside him. Or through him. 3 more shapes circled, eyes glowing faintly, calculating. They moved in unison, intelligent in their hunting rhythm. Elias shifted his stance, the old instincts surfacing, but the rhythm of his body was different now, faster, sharper. His knife flashed. One beast fell, its chest split open in a spray of black ichor. Another raked his side, claws cutting through his shirt, but his skin only tore shallowly before sealing, knitting itself before his eyes. He staggered back, more horrified than relieved. The last guardian leapt, jaws wide, and Elias met it midair, twisting them both into a brutal collision with the ground. His fist came down once, twice, until the creature's skull cracked like pottery. He pushed off the carcass, gasping, his hands trembling with gore. When silence returned, he realized Kale had not moved. The watcher stood by the pool, watching with the calm of one who had seen the trial countless times before. "You fought like one born for it," Kale said, voice carrying no triumph, only measured observation. The pool did not choose poorly. Elias wiped his knife on the edge of his torn shirt, anger rising to drown the tremors in his hands. "You set me up. You knew those things would attack." "They are not merely beasts," Kale replied. "They are the ancient guardians, creations of the same race that forged the pool. Their only purpose is to reveal whether the conduit is strong enough to endure." Elias spat on the stone floor. "And if I hadn't been, then you would already be bones among theirs." Kale gestured toward the far edge of the chamber, where Elias now noticed the crumbled remains of men long dead, armor rusted, skulls cracked. His stomach tightened. He had been steps away from joining them. He turned to Kale, forcing his voice steady. "You keep calling me conduit. Conduit of what?" Kale's eyes seemed to gleam brighter in the cavern light. "A conduit of the echo. The water carries a living memory, a consciousness older than your kind. It has bound itself to you." That whisper you heard, his tone dropped. "It was not mine." Elias stiffened. The memory of the voice slid back through his thoughts, colder now, more intrusive. "Then what was it?" "The echo," Kale said. "A remnant of an extinct race. Their minds were not destroyed when their bodies perished. They left fragments of themselves in the pool, waiting for one who could carry them. You have become that vessel." Elias shook his head, heart hammering. "You're telling me I'm possessed by aliens?" "Not possessed," Kale corrected, calm as ever. "Merged. A symbiosis. The echo offers its knowledge, its power, but it demands a bearer. And in return, you are something no longer entirely human." Elias's grip tightened around his knife until the leather creaked. "I didn't ask for this." "No one ever does." Kale's gaze softened just a fraction. "But if you can endure, you will wield what no other man alive can." Elias paced, anger and fear warring inside him. He wanted to deny it, to walk out and never look back. But the changes in his body, the visions in his sleep, the unnatural strength that had saved his life, there was no denying he had already crossed a line. "Why?" Elias demanded suddenly. "Why me? Why humanity? If these echo creatures are so powerful, why not choose their own kind?" Kale's answer came with a gravity that pressed into the chamber walls. "Because their kind is gone. And because humanity is not what it believes itself to be. The seeds were planted long ago. Your species was prepared, without knowing, to carry their legacy. Some call it manipulation. Others call it destiny. You call it survival." Elias froze. The weight of Kale's words settled like lead. The desert, the cave, the pool, none of it had been chance. He was not just some man who stumbled into a legend. He had been shaped long before his birth, part of a design older than history. His voice broke into a low growl. "Then what now? You said this was a trial. What comes after?" Kale's gaze shifted toward the darkened ceiling, as though listening to something Elias could not hear. "After this comes the war. The echo chose you because the enemy stirs again. They have awakened, as the pool has awakened, and they are seeking to reclaim what was lost." Before Elias could demand more, the cavern trembled. Dust fell from above, crystals vibrating like struck glass. A deep rumble rolled through the stone, so low it resonated in Elias's bones. He instinctively reached for the wall, steadying himself, but the vibration grew into something heavier, more deliberate. Kale's expression darkened, for the first time showing something close to fear. It is too soon. Elias's chest tightened. What is? The Harbingers. Kale's voice was grim, low. The forerunners of the enemy. They have sensed the echoes awakening. One comes now. The rumble intensified into a roar that shook the chamber, cracks splitting across the stone. The pool quivered, its light rippling like a heartbeat racing under threat. Elias's skin prickled, every nerve on edge, as though his body recognized the danger before his mind could. Kale turned sharply, his voice hard as steel. You must decide, Elias Ward. Will you fight as the echoes conduit, or run and watch the world crumble when the Harbingers descend? There is no other path. Elias's pulse thundered in his ears. He had faced battles, bullets, men who wanted him dead, but nothing like this. And yet he felt the raw power coursing through him, the alien force that had fused with his veins. He had not chosen this fate, but it had chosen him, and choice no longer mattered. The cavern shook again, a fissure splitting open at the far wall. Heat and shadow poured from it, along with a presence so immense Elias staggered as if struck. The air itself bent, heavy with a will not human. Kale stepped back, eyes fixed on the breach. The trial is over. The war begins. The fissure split wider, belching heat and darkness as though the desert itself had torn open to let something crawl free. Elias braced against the trembling ground, knife still clutched though it suddenly felt like nothing more than a shard of scrap metal in his grip. The presence that pushed through the breach was overwhelming, more than sight, more than sound. It pressed into his bones, into his lungs, a weight that made him feel like an insect before a storm. A figure emerged. Its body towered, sinew and metal fused into a grotesque harmony, each step sinking deep into the stone as if the ground itself yielded to its will. Its head was elongated, crowned with jagged protrusions that shimmered faintly like blades catching firelight. Its eyes burned with a dim, relentless glow, fixed instantly upon Elias. Kale's voice rang sharp, though laced with dread. A harbinger. It has come for the echo. The creature's mouth split into a jagged approximation of speech, though its words crawled more into the mind than through the ears. You are unworthy of what you carry. Elias felt the voice dig into his skull like talons. He staggered back, but the pool behind him pulsed, the water shimmering as though answering. A rush of energy surged through him, painful yet steadying, as if the echo itself rose to defend its new host. Kale drew closer, standing beside him for the first time rather than watching from afar. Do not yield to its will. The Harbinger's strength is not only in its flesh but in its command over fear. Stand against it, Elias. Stand, or all ends here. The Harbinger advanced. Stone cracked under its steps, fissures spreading across the chamber floor. Elias's instincts screamed to flee, but something else surged louder, an ember of defiance, the same stubborn will that had carried him through battlefields where others had fallen. He bared his teeth, a low growl rising from his throat. The creature struck first, its arm lashing out like a battering ram. Elias dodged with inhuman speed, the motion so natural it startled him even as his body obeyed. The blow shattered the wall behind him, spraying shards across the chamber. Elias lunged forward, knife flashing, and drove it into the Harbinger's side. The blade sank only inches before snapping against armored hide. The creature barely flinched. It swung again, and Elias caught the strike with both hands. The force sent him skidding across the stone, arms burning with the effort. But he held. Sparks flew as bone met bone, strength against impossible strength. For a heartbeat, Elias looked into its eyes and felt the abyss staring back. Kale's voice thundered across the chamber. You are not its equal in brute force. Use what it cannot comprehend. Use your humanity. The words struck deep. Elias remembered every fight he had ever survived, not because he was the strongest, but because he adapted, because he endured, because he thought while others only charged. The Harbinger lunged again. This time Elias did not meet it head-on. He twisted aside, guiding the momentum past him, and slashed at the creature's exposed joints. Sparks and black ichor spilled, and the thing howled, the sound shaking stalactites loose from the ceiling. Elias darted away, every sense alight, No longer a soldier with a blade but something faster, sharper, a predator honed by alien fire yet driven by human will. The chamber cracked under the strain. The pool's glow pulsed brighter, flooding Elias with surges of raw energy until his veins burned like molten wires. He struck again and again, weaving around the Harbinger's massive blows, cutting into tendons and seams where flesh met alloy. But the creature endured, its wounds smoking but unyielding, its strength undimmed. At last it caught him with a backhanded strike. The blow hurled him across the chamber, his body smashing into stone with bone-jarring force. He slid to the ground, gasping, vision fractured with stars. For a moment the power inside him faltered, the alien energy flickering like a dying flame. The Harbinger loomed, raising a claw to finish him. Elias pushed against the stone, body trembling, blood in his mouth. His mind screamed that it was over. Cale stepped forward then, placing himself between Elias and the oncoming strike. His arms lifted, and for the first time his voice carried strain. Conduit, remember this. Power is nothing without the will to bear it. Humanity endures not because it was given strength, but because it refuses to die. The Harbinger's strike fell. Cale caught it with both hands, his body shuddering under the weight, bones cracking. He met Elias's gaze. Now show them why humanity was chosen. The claw tore through him, and Cale crumpled. Something inside Elias broke and then ignited. Rage, grief, defiance, all fused with the echo's burning presence. His body lit with light searing from within, veins glowing beneath his skin. He rose with a roar that was not entirely human, the chamber trembling with its force. The Harbinger turned, but too late. Elias charged, his movements a blur, striking not with raw strength but with precision born of fury and cunning. He leapt, scaling the creature's form, driving his glowing fists into its eyes until fire spilled from its skull. The Harbinger thrashed, but Elias clung like a man possessed, tearing through armored flesh with savage determination. At last he plunged both hands into the fissure he had carved and unleashed the echo's full surge. The chamber exploded with light. The Harbinger convulsed, a shriek ripping from its core before it collapsed in a heap of smoldering ruin. Elias dropped beside it, body trembling, skin still glowing faintly as the echo receded into his blood. He staggered upright, chest heaving, the silence that followed heavier than any roar. Cale lay broken near the pool, his breath shallow, eyes dimming. Elias stumbled to his side, kneeling beside him. The Watcher's lips curled into a faint, blooded smile. You see it now. Not their power. Yours. Humanity has always been, more than it believed. His hand twitched weakly, then fell still. Elias bowed his head. For the first time in years, his throat tightened with something deeper than exhaustion. He closed Cale's eyes with trembling fingers, then rose. The pool's glow had faded. Its surface stilled, no longer alive with whispers. The chamber around him cracked and groaned, stone collapsing from the ceiling. The place was dying. Elias stumbled toward the fissure that had birthed the Harbinger, forcing his body to move despite the weight of loss and the alien fire still smoldering within him. Behind him, the pool shattered in silence, scattering into the stone as though it had never been. He emerged into the desert night, air cool and stars sharp overhead. The world seemed impossibly vast, yet unbearably fragile. He felt the echo inside him, quiet now, but not gone. It was waiting, patient, carrying secrets he had yet to unlock. The desert wind whispered around him, and for a moment he swore he heard that voice again. Now the war begins. Elias tightened his fists, staring into the horizon. He had not chosen this path, but it was his now. He was no longer entirely human, yet what remained of his humanity was what gave the power meaning. Whatever war awaited, he would face it as Elias Ward, man, soldier, and conduit. And the universe would learn why humanity endures.